Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Battle for Azeroth Beta. So, I had an idea. I wanted to make a video, kind of have a progressive series, if you will, where I could just kind of give commentary on changes in the game, I guess would be the way to explain it. Not just the expansion or the patch, but the expansion, patch, the current current things as changes progress in the game, so to speak. And I'm going to call it State of, because of could be anything. It could be a class, it could be a patch, it could be a change. It doesn't matter. Just to kind of give some thoughts, commentary, some kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of a I can't think. Kind of a different opinion, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I thought I would start with Mage. State of Mage, at least on beta. There's not a lot of content that's kind of relevant for beta. Right now, as close as we are to it releasing, I've done a lot of things. I've done a lot of the, I think, obvious things. So I was just kind of looking for, trying to think of different ideas for videos, and I thought, well, this will kill kind of two birds with one stone, because I did want to kind of cover another class just for some perspective and levity. I think all the videos I've uploaded so far have been just Shaman. And since I have, since BFA, Jaina has such a, keeps reoccurring, we'll just say for lack of details and spoilers and things like that, I thought I'd cover Mage, because I like Mage. Mage is one of the classes I play quite a bit. So, two things to note off the top. First of all, and I'm kind of excited about this, we got Arcane Intellect back. They did say that we were going to get our buffs back, so kind of excited about that. Haven't in the dungeons. You can go back and watch the videos. I don't know that anybody in our group actually buffed us. I don't know that we had the right classes to have the buff, but there were enough buffs in the game. I would have thought, three dungeons, 15 different people. I was 3 of those, so 12 different people. You would have thought somebody would have had a buff. There's only 12 classes in the game, I think. Somewhere around there. So yeah. Does, as far as I can remember, does what it did before. increases your intellect for 1 hour. If you're in a party you're rated, it buffs everybody in the raid. The other thing is, you might notice the water elemental for Frost Mage got an upgrade. And I have to say, I am liking the upgrade. Looks like a little badass now. So yeah. Otherwise, we're just going to kind of go over each spec, go over the talents in a little more detail. Nothing's really changed. As I've said, I may have already said in a video, nothing really has changed, which I think is a good thing. Our artifact talents, from what I can see, or artifact abilities, I should say, have become talents now, from what I can see. The only frost and fire were. Arcane was not, for some reason. I could not find it. It was not in the spellbook, and it was not. It was not a talent. I don't know what the deal is there. Otherwise, though, everything is pretty much as it was. From what I'm seeing, a lot of classes got a lot of older, I'll say, abilities back. They didn't so much change the talents as just kind of jumble them up, so to speak. They've moved some things around. They've added some things. They've taken some things away. Obviously, just to rebalance everything. I think that's why they every expansion I can remember that we've had this talent system. I think they've changed something just to rebalance it. So, looking through the spell book here, you'll see nothing's really of note. As far as portals go, you do get the portal to the Horde, or to the Alliance side at 110. Now, I don't know if that's a beta thing or if that's a way to be alive, but I was able to get both the port for myself and the port for group at 110. So, at a cost of 60 gold each. So, yeah. Nothing. I was disappointed Ice Block still does not heal. That's probably my biggest criticism with Mage, is because they took first aid away. I don't think that's really spoiling anything. I think people knew that. They took first aid away. The reasoning I was told, and this was just somebody I was talking to, was because they said, well, every class has a heal now. Mage does not have a heal. Nothing I'm seeing heals you, or I would have taken it. You do have Ice Barrier. And there are passive talents that modify these depending on the spec that you are in. Other than that, that's pretty much it. If you are, I'm 190, which is the equivalent of like 880 on live, something like that. You know, it's weird, some of the titles didn't transfer over. I digress. Yeah, it's about 880. So fully geared, you should be able to, depending on the spec you're in, you should be able to kill your, whatever you're trying to do before that becomes an issue in most cases. And you do have your conjured food. However, this can't be used in combat. If a heal cannot be used in combat, then I don't count it as a full-fledged heal. Because there's too much of a chance you're going to kill something, and then, maybe a mob wanders in on patrol and, comes at you again. We do still have invisibility. I did use this the other day. But that even has a 5-minute cooldown. I mean, it's just either you're going to have something that can heal you in and out of combat, or you're not. That's not a criticism towards mages. That's just a general statement, I feel like. Other than that, exactly how you would think it would play, which I was glad. I wasn't necessarily hyped up with the changes they made from Warlords to Legion, so I was glad to see they kind of kept things as they were. The talents for Frost look like this. So, yeah, they basically kind of moved everything over from the right to the left. And I do mean that in the most literal sense in a lot of cases from what I'm noticing. They just kind of moved everything over. And then either added spells back in or put talents into, appropriate to, put talent in relevant to these spells. Whether those spells be new or old. So, as I said, E-Bone Bolt is now a talent. It is, and this varies as far as the position. I think, I'm trying to think, it may or may not. I think it does change. Because I think some of them have been like N tier talents, but at this point they only go up to 100. We're 110, so it shouldn't be an issue. Works just like it did before, as far as I know. I'm not a big detail person, so forgive me if I miss like one little thing here or there. I was going more for the general overview rather than a specific detailed kind of thing. Launches a bolt and grants you brain freeze. So your ice lance against frozen targets increases damage of your ice lance for 3 seconds, stacks up 5 times, and then frostbolt grants you frost fingers and brain freeze 20% more often. So yeah, Frost is a pretty solid. It respecs everything for you, at least in beta. So I kind of moved some things around to, like Glacier Spike. I think they had me on like Freeze of Frost or something. So I just kind of set everything back up just how I had it. Ice Nova, I'm trying to remember if they took this out or not. I think they took this out because it's not on my... I think this had 2 chargers in Warlords, and I think they took it out. So that's a good example. They brought this back, if I'm not mistaken. I think for me, I mean, this is a decent amount of spells. We have a couple AoE. We have some single target, things like that. I picked Bone Chilling just because I'd rather have the passive. Lonely Winter, I wanted this to be good. I like having my Frost Elemental, my Water Elemental, I should say, excuse me. But I wanted this to be good. I after playing Hunter as much as I have in Legion and Lone Wolf, specifically in marksmanship, Lone Wolf does the same thing as Lonely Winter, so I hoped it would be good, but it's just weird not to have your water elemental, and it helps you proc. Let's see if they changed that. It used to help you proc. Your brain freeze, I thought. Maybe they changed it. What do I know? Because this isn't telling me anything. Yeah. And I'm not seeing what this is saying. Oh, so they put a different passive ability in to brain freeze. I see. Okay. I think Winter's Chill used to be. It used to have Water Jet, which had a cooldown. And when they used it, if you hit the target, at the same time, it would grant you either Frostfingers or Brain Freeze. I don't remember. Yeah. So there you go. So I think your choices here are going to be between Bone Chilling and Ice Nova, depending on your preference. I took Splitting Ice. Your Ice Lance and Icicles now deal 5% damage and hit a second nearby target. The thing that I think this is new. I'm not sure. Don't hold me to this. Your Ebon Bolt and Glacier Spike also hit a second nearby target for 80% of its damage. So yeah, that's good enough. I don't need this. I don't need another spell down here that I'm going to have to. Yeah, this is good enough. So that's pretty much, unless I don't know that I've even seen another mage run Lonely Winter. So unless you're running some kind of setup where this is useful to you somehow, Bone Chilling or Ice Nova is probably going to be the two things you're going to choose from there. This is like I was saying. I've noticed there's passive abilities now that interact with the barrier, which I think makes sense. Since every spec did have Ice Barrier, but these passive abilities all do something slightly different. So this increases armor by 200, and Ice Block applies Ice Barrier to you when it fades. So not bad. Helps with survivability. Shimmer's the same as it was, and Ice Foes is the same as what it was too. Makes your next few spells castable while moving. So Glacier in yeah, seemed like the default choice there. Here it kind of depended. I like Mirror Image just for the nostalgia. I like burst damage. I like to just pop everything and be able to do damage. Fried Rune of Power, like back in Warlords, didn't like it, never picked it again. Incanter's Flow I use on fire, and yeah, for some, I think because of PvP. For PvP reasons, I think I took this on fire. Yeah, I see a lot of people in Frost taking Mirror Image, so I think that's probably the default there, unless you, for some reason, like Rune of Power, or Incanter's Flow, either one. So yeah, any of those three seem pretty decent. Obviously, I took E-Bone Bolt, just to kind of put things back the way they were, before I started tweaking things. Frost Touch grants charged Frost Fingers and 20% more often. Brain Freeze. These type of spells can be good and bad. I think just to put it simply. I like to know if I'm going to hit something, it's going to do something. I don't want there to be a chance for something. That's what was... I think that's what was kind of frustrating for a lot of people with Fire, for example, was you had to get critical strikes, which I understand critical strikes aren't going to be necessarily guaranteed every time if you're going by your critical strike percentage. However, there were spells that Fire had that did grant a guaranteed critical strike every time. So it was just a little weird trying to figure that out. I remember in expansions past, and passive abilities like this kind of remind me of that. I don't want to be sitting here, hoping something happens. I want to be able to, like I said, I want to be able to do, more kind of a burst style damage. So, and that's what Mage is. They're a damage they're supposed to be a high damage class. That's why they wear cloth armor. So, this could potentially be good. I don't know. It's something I think you probably have to play around with and see. If for whatever reason I wanted to get rid of E-Bone Bolts and change something else, I could see trying this. A chain reaction, again, spells that stack. Incanter's Flow stacks, but it cycles. So it's good and potentially less so depending on your situation. Things like this, and that's why I was reluctant to take Bone Chilling, because it does the same thing. It stacks. It's yeah. You kind of have to play around, see what works, and just kind of go from there. I think. Taking one versus taking both of these. You don't want two things that you're having to stack. At least in my opinion, I'm not a big raider. I don't know what, just for PvE kind of stuff, or PvP. Yeah, this probably wouldn't be great depending on what you were trying to do. At least in my opinion, I don't look at these spells in high regard. Yeah, I try to find things. I tend to prefer if talents are passive, because you can just click something. You don't have to worry about trying to work in another spell and things like that. So definitely think E-Bone Bolt is probably the best spell in this talent. So, or in this tier, I should say. Excuse me. Which, I guess that's a flaw of this, just as a side comment. I guess this is a flaw of this. You either get a a tier where you kind of have two things you have to choose from, which I think has been my biggest pet peeve with this talent system. Or you end up getting one where the other two just really kind of aren't that good. And I'm not saying these aren't good. I'm just using this as kind of an example. There's two things that you look at and you're like, this could potentially be good or not. I'm not sure depending on the situation. This Ebon Bolt is going to do this much damage and grant you Brain Freeze. So it's just a matter of 45-second cooldown's not, it's not short, but it's not long. You can use it a few times even in a short fight. So, Frigid Winds, all your chilling effects reduces the target's movement speed. Frost Nova has 2 charges. I seldomly use Frost Nova, even in PvP. And Ring of Frost I have taken just by default in several times, and again, never use it. So by default, I picked Frigid Winds. Again, passive ability. So Splitting Ice, I've always picked this. I glyphed this when it was a glyph. I just like, now that we have Ice Glacier, or Glacier Spike, I should say, excuse me. And, can do a lot of damage instead of just sending out little things. It's a little bit different, but when you had Icicles, this was really good because you were just sending multiples of things. You were taking what would be normally a single target ability and you're making it an AoE ability by default. So, Freezing Orb makes Blizzard's cost and instant cast and increases its damage by 35% for 3 seconds. This is good. Using Frozen Orb with a 1-minute cooldown is kind of, I'm noticing more recently in the expansions, it's kind of more situational. Because if you send it out the wrong way, it doesn't go through a lot of stuff. So if you don't have a clear path to your target, to the mob you're trying to AoE, is what I was trying to say. This is kind of wasted. So I find myself wanting to make sure I'm guaranteed that this is going to move forward and not get stuck on something, basically. Which is kind of weird for a spell, but nevertheless. Comet Storm. Took this in, I think, when the pre-patch for Legion came out in Warlords. So again, any of these 3 I think are probably solid, depending on how you wanted to spec yourself. And then the last one, I put Glacier Spike just because that's what I had by default to begin with. Ray of Frost, it's a channeled ability. I'm not a big fan of channeled abilities, and it has a cooldown. Channel an Ice Beam at the target for 4.3 seconds, dealing X amount of frost damage, slowing by 75% each time, deals damage. The damage and snare increases 10%. Generates 2 charges of frost, Fingers of Frost over its duration. So not a bad spell. I prefer not to use a channeled ability if I can. This, you generate your, you get it to a point you can use it. Requires 5 icicles to cast, so you generate those, you're good to go, and then you start it over again. So it works well with the rotation for me, for how I play. Thermal Void, your ice durations increase by seconds. Extend your. I've tried using this. It sounds really good. I found it difficult to use in practice. So, yeah, I use this as kind of a mini cooldown when I can't use time warps. So, yeah. So still pretty solid. Not, like I said, not a lot of changes. I'm finding a lot of things are just kind of neutral. They're not really. I wouldn't say they're any better. They're not any worse. They're just kind of. They didn't really change much of the status quo. So, which I'm glad for the most part. I think one expansion where we can rest from logging in and having half our spells gone or having to reset everything. I think it would be is going to be a welcome change. So if we switch over to fire, and yeah, nothing really changed here. We'll go through the spellbook real quick. Still have all our same abilities for the most part. Yeah, I don't think anything really needs explanation there. Mastery works the same way it does before. So if we go to talent, this is what we're looking at. So as I said before, and I guess this is in the same spot as Ebon Bolt was. Phoenix Flame is now a talent, which I was really excited about because this grants this grants a critical strike. So you have Fire Blast and Phoenix Flames. So you rarely only ever need to use Firebolt when these two are on cooldown, basically. You're going to get a lot of Pyroblasts. The free Pyroblast off, or Flame Strike, either one. Especially with Combustion. Yeah, you only really need your Pyroblast procs, one critical strike, and then you can use one of these, so it gets crazy. This didn't really change a lot. I was kind of anticipating this changing and maybe not being as good. This is about as simple as I've seen fire as a spec. So I was glad they kept it more or less the same. Otherwise, let's see. And like I said, they moved a lot of spells over, so that's kind of why I took everything down one side, just trying to put things back the way they were, just so I could kind of get my bearings. So Firestarter, your Fireball and Pyro Blast spells always deal a critical strike when the target's above 90% health. Casting Pyroblast or Flame Strike while Hot Streak is active has an 8% chance to instantly reactivate Hot Streak. I think that's the one I actually had. Scorch deals 150% increased damage and guarantees critical strike when the target's below 30% health. So, yeah. Any of these pretty well decent depending on, I think fire, maybe more so than others, is very there is no kind of requires more attention to detail, I think would be the way to say it, depending on your play style with this. I was PvPing with fire, so I had things a little bit. I like to be a little more self-reliant, self-contained in PvP, because you never know kind of what group you're going to get into or what group you're going to be facing off against, things like that. So, yeah, I mean, either one of these are. I'm not a big fan of the spells, where your target has to be above or below a certain amount, but they work. A lot of PvP abilities had that in the text, and yeah, they work. So whatever your preference here, I would say. I think otherwise, Pyromaniac's probably the default. I think I played around with this in Legion, and this is what worked best, because you want to get your procs, as many procs as you can with this. So, yeah, that would be my recommendation. Burning Soul, casting Blink ignites a blazing barrier around you. So, like I said, they actually move this anyway. They added passive abilities in to work with this, which I think is a really good idea. So, yeah, seemed worthwhile. If you're blinking, chances are you are blinking either out of a stun or a root, or you're if you're blinking in combat, I should say, chances are you are blinking for a specific reason. So this seemed like it would be good. Like I said, Shimmer's still the same. Blast Wave causes an explosion around yourself, dealing X fire damage to all enemies within 8 yards, knocking them back and reducing movement speed by 70%. So this is kind of like a arcane explosion. How did I forget that? With knockback. So, yeah, unless you are a fan of Shimmer, and I don't know a mage that takes Shimmer, probably Blazing Soul and Blast Wave, either one. As a mage, it always struck me as odd with Arcane Explosion that as a range class, you would have an ability that had to be used at melee range, so to speak. Just seemed kind of like when Priest had the ability to, I think it was Inner Fire, to enhance their melee attacks. And as it was pointed out, for years while they had that ability, they had no melee attacks. Incanter's Flow, as I said, PvP. Otherwise, I'd probably take Mirror Image. I think it seems like I took Mirror Image and it didn't. Didn't work out. I think the cooldown was too long or something. And Rune of Power is not going to help you a great deal in PvP, in my opinion. I've seen mages take this for PvP, but this seemed like, again, trying to be self-contained and self-reliant, this seemed like it would be worthwhile, because you're going to be getting your procs with having two abilities that guarantee a critical strike. So, yeah. Like I said, Phoenix Flame. Why wouldn't you? Guarantees a critical strike. Alexstrasza's Fury, Dragon Breath always critical strikes, and contributes to Hot Streak. Flame On reduces the cooldown of Fire Blast by 2 seconds and increases the maximum number of charges by 1. So, yeah, really either one. I rarely use Dragon's Breath. So, yeah, Mage is probably the class that has the most spells I don't use for whatever reason. And yet I still manage to do decent DPS. In this, I could I was doing like top 5, top 10 DPS, just popping everything. We had keep in mind we had alter time then, so it was a lot to do with that. But and I didn't do like mythic or the flex rating or anything like that. We're talking low. I think at most I did like maybe a normal boss here or there. So yeah, either of these, depending again, I think on your preference. So not bad. The talents are getting better. They're improving. I was pleasantly surprised when I was looking through and was seeing them. I'm like, oh, that's that could be worthwhile. I could see how that would be useful to somebody, or oh, that would be okay. It wasn't like, oh, that's kind of rubbish or anything. I've been seeing that less and less and less. A lot of abilities seem worthwhile. It seems like they put a little more effort, if that's the right way to say it. I don't think it is, into the talents this time. It seems like more work went into it this time, which is good. I think if they, we are still in beta. However, I think if they continue doing it this way, kind of leaving the core abilities, the class abilities alone, tweaking that. I understand you kind of have to tweak some things for balance and whatnot, but if you leave it alone and focus on, the talents and things like that people can use to customize their gameplay a little bit, I think people will be happy with that. Excuse me. Frantic speed. Casting Scorch increases your movement speed by 30%. Now, I don't use Scorch. Again, don't know why. But compared to Ice Ward, again, don't use Frost Nova, and have rarely ever used Ring of Frost. I just took this by default. So I will, something like this, I will keep in mind what it does, and I will try to use it just to get the passive ability. So yeah, who knows? Like I said, you really don't use Fireball anymore except for when Fire Blast or Phoenix Flames is on cooldown. So I might swap these around just for the sake of it. It just, usually Scorch does less damage than Fireball. So Flame Patch. Flame Strike leaves behind a patch of flames, which burns enemies within for X fire damage over 8 seconds. Conflagration. Fireball applies to the target, dealing an additional X amount of fire damage over 8 seconds. Enemies affected either by conflagration or ignite have a 10% chance to flare up and deal X fire damage to nearby enemies. Again, kind of yeah. And then Living Bomb. The target becomes a living bomb, taking X fire damage over 3.4 seconds, and then exploding, dealing X fire damage to the target and all enemies within within 10 yards. Other enemies hit by the explosion also become a living bomb, but this effect cannot spread further. So, for simplicity's sake, I might take Living Bomb. I was trying to think which one. In Miss, I think it was this tier 2, was all Living Bombs. You had 1 Frost, 1 Fire, and 1 Arcane. And I'm trying to think which one. As I remember, Frost and Fire were decent, and then Arcane was kind of the rubbish one. I I like this to leave something behind. So I picked Flame Patch just out of personal preference. Any of these seem good. Conflagration, I'm not. Yeah, I don't know. This is one of those abilities that I have to kind of play with to see. If they'd have taken away Phoenix Flames, I probably would have picked this instead, just to give me kind of a single target AoE kind of thing. Because Phoenix Flames, to nearby targets, yes, is a single target AoE kind of a ability. So it would have replaced it in the rotation well. So I think, yeah, whatever your personal preference. Again, PvP, thinking PvP. I did try to use this in a dungeon, and it did not work as well as I had hoped. I was kind of disappointed. I kind of was just I was in the Assault on Violet Hold, the Legion version, and I was kind of disappointed. So I might take this to play with it just to see. Yeah, we'll change it just to see. If I don't do it now, I'll forget. Kindling your Fireball, Pyroblast, and Fire Blast, and Phoenix Flames Critical Strike reduces the remaining cooldown on Combustion by 1 second. Combustion is really good now and really simple to use. If you've tried to use this in the past, this spec was just a what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, you had to. This spec required some experience, shall we say? Real simple concept. The to oversimplify it, the idea for fire was to do cleave damage. So yeah, but this was very, you had to use it at the right time. And again, we have altered time, and there was a whole big, as I remember trying to use this like back when I first started, trying to figure this out. Yeah, it was a lot more complicated, needless to say. Pyroclasm, consume hot streak. Consuming hot streak has a 15% chance to make your next non-instant cast Pyroblast for 50 seconds. Deal 250% additional damage, maximum 2 charges. And Meteor, which I did try to use at one point. Calls out a meteor which lands at the target location, dealing X fire damage split evenly among all targets within 8 yards, and burns the ground, dealing X damage over 8 seconds to all enemies. So it splits the damage evenly. Other than that, basically does the same thing as Flame Strike, or I guess this is, well, no, this is the target location too. This reduces movement speed. This does not reduce movement speed. Yeah. So this ability is base flame strike is baseline. Then you take a passive ability, and you have basically a meteor. So this is kind of this was, I think that's why I picked something else too, because I thought, why do I have two abilities that kind of semi do the same thing? So yeah. pretty solid, pretty simple. I'm glad they kept it simple. Yeah, not much else to. Basically, you're using Fireball, Fire Blast, and Phoenix Flames to get off as many Pyroblasts as possible. And if you have Combustion, you don't need 2 critical strikes. You just need you basically will almost always get one with Pyroblast. So you think of this, instead of having to use 2 of these and getting 2 critical strikes. This is 10 seconds, 30 seconds. These, between the 2 of these have 5 charges, so you're guaranteed at least 2 Pyroblast. You're actually getting 5, if not more. And if this procs again on its own, off itself, to be instant casts, I've had 3 back to back. So this can get this can get out of hand pretty quick, depending on your luck with your critical strikes and things. And combustion goes a long way to doing that. So it's not a lot to say. It's that simple. So we'll switch over to Arcane. Now, Arcane, admittedly, I don't play a lot.
You must pace yourself, child.
Indeed. So bear with me here. So if we go through the spell book here, got displacement, but we've had displacement. I really like this. This is fun if you're running old dungeons and you need to backtrack or you go the wrong way or something. So I'll explain that in a minute. And yeah. Okay, so if we go to talents, so of the 3, I'm going to say, at least in the time I've been playing, Arcane's had the most changes. While I like Mage, I've played Frost, I've played Fire, I've played them both specs as Mage being a main character. I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with Arcane just because I don't like the concept of it. So, you have to again, to oversimplify it, you have to what do you have to do before I sit here and say the wrong thing? Let me double check this. Increase your maxima, your mana regeneration rate, maximum mana, increase the damage. I was trying to remember which way it it's your I want to say the more you train your mana, the less damage your spells do. I was trying to think which way it worked. But it's a concept I've never really had the full grasp of. I've tried playing Arcane a few times, and I think I played it at the end of Mist. It seems like beginning of or sometime in Warlords, and that was very just for the length of a patch, I think, and that was it. So I picked Rule of 3. This may be my favorite talent ability I've seen. You gain your third arcane charge. When you gain your third arcane charge, the cost of your arcane blast or arcane missiles is reduced by 100%. So yeah. Amplification. When clear casting, arcane missiles fires one additional missile. For each 100 mana you spend, you have a 1% chance to gain clear casting, making your next arcane missiles or arcane explosion free, and channel 20% faster. Okay. And then arcane familiar. Summon a familiar to attack your enemies and increases your maximum mana by 10% for 1 hour. So yeah, just out of curiosity, I picked this one. I think I left it here. I think this was what it gave me by default when I copied her from live. Mana Shield. Prismatic Barrier has no cooldown, but your mana is drained by 20% of the damage it absorbs. So, yeah, as I said, the lower your mana goes, the less damage you do. So this doesn't seem all that great. Yeah. Shimmer. Been over that. Slipstream, clearcasting allows arcane missiles to be channeled while moving. And Evocation can be channeled while moving as well. So this is really helpful, especially with Evocation. So probably Mana Shield. I'm sure somebody has figured out a way to use Mana Shield efficiently, or will figure it out. But it's beyond me with this. I try to. I get very confused very easily with this, as you might already notice. Yeah. Mirror image, rune of power, these are the same. So mirror image, you want your spells to do. I went back and forth between incantators, yeah. I just said it a minute ago. Between this one and mirror image, my thinking was again, kind of with the burst damage, you know your mana is going to go down and your DPS is going to go down. So you want to try to keep that pressure up. So mirror image seemed like it was decent. Supernova. I think this is. I actually got this confused with Arcane Orb originally when I was going over the talents earlier. To be honest, I think this is one they removed from the game, if I'm not mistaken. Pulses arcane energy around the target, enemy, or ally, dealing X arcane damage to all enemies within 8 yards and knocking them upwards. A primary target will always take 100% increased damage. So I think this had like 2 charges, and it was like the one frost ability. So I took this because you can use it on a target. You don't have to pick a target location, so it seemed decent. Immediately grants 4 arcane charges. I'm not good with spells like this. Rogues have spells like this that grant you combo points and things like that, and I think there's other classes that grant, whatever your resource is, they grant you a full resource. I'm just not good with abilities like this. I don't have the coordination to use them. So for me personally, I skip over spells like this because I've tried and yeah. Renaissance. Yeah, Renaissance. 3 , 3 , 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3 or resource. No, Renaissance, yes. Arcane Barrage deals 15 damage, 15 increased damage per targeted hits. And you really only want to use this when you have your arcane charges. So in that case, you have a talent that can only be used when your ability is ready to be used, which is a little restrictive, I guess. I don't know. To me, it just doesn't seem like it has value as much as like Supernova. This has a much shorter cooldown. Generally speaking, that's going to take you a few seconds in between to generate those. Does not go over arcane charges. Nothing goes over each arcane charge increases damage by 60%. Yeah. Supernova is a little bit of AoE. Arcane has always been, as I can remember, very single target oriented. So having a little bit of AoE is not a bad thing. I remember in Warlords trying to play Arcane and having no AoE abilities at all. And it's kind of a pain. Ice Ward. Apparently I did not go over these. Arcane Barrage slows enemies by 50% and increases your movement speed. Probably that one. Yeah, so Ice Ward does the same thing. Ring of Frost does the same thing. This works like the spell with what was it? Dragon's Breath. So, Touch of Mage. Arcane Blast has a 10% chance to apply Touch of Mage, accumulating 20% of the damage you deal to the target for 8 seconds, and then exploding for that amount of arcane damage to the target and all nearby targets. So this tier was a bit odd. River Bright. Reverberate, yeah. If Arcane Explosion hits at least 3 targets, it has a 50% chance to grant extra arcane charge. So this, I think, could be really good, depending on how often you're going to use Arcane Explosion. Again, it's one of those weird things where it's pretty much a melee ability. And it's, yeah. So I looked at it and I said, oh, well, that could be really good if I end up having to use this. As previously mentioned, you don't have a lot of AoE with this spec. So, yeah. And then Nether Tempest, place another Tempest on the target, which deals X arcane damage over 12 seconds to the target, and X to all enemies within 10 yards, limit 1. Again, kind of as a timing thing, damage increased by 68% per arcane charge. So, it'd be my luck. I would forget to use this, and I would use Arcane Barrage. So, by default, just to try it out, because this is a touch of Mage, I'm going to go with Mage. This is a new ability, so I'll try it out and see how it works. If not, probably another. I don't know. Because again, you kind of got enough down here. I don't like I like to try to simplify things as much as possible. So, timely anomaly. At any moment, you have a chance to gain arcane power for 10 seconds, gain invocation every 1 second, or gain 4 arcane charges. So that is what she has been doing. And why wouldn't we pick this? This may be the most fun passive ability I've seen so far. Arcane Orb. Does what it always did, launches an arcane orb from your position, traveling up to 40 yards, dealing X arcane damage to all enemies that passes through and granting 1 charge for every enemy it deals damage to. Overpowered, your arcane power now increases damage by 60% and reduces the mana cost by 60%. So I almost took this. I was torn between time anomaly and overpowered. But time anomaly, she kept doing this, and I was like, why is she doing this? Because it kept freaking me out because I didn't know what was going on. Time anomaly, though, I think is, and it works well with a roll of 3. So, right? When you gain your third charge, the cost is reduced. I think. Yeah. Maybe not. Yes, it was. Okay. So yeah, that's all 3 with a more detailed view of the talents. I'm excited to see when this goes live, kind of what other people think. And yeah, I'm trying to think if I went over everything. I think I went over everything. So there you go, folks. Might be a little longer video than I might make for a state of video in the future, but wanted to kind of cover something else just because I've been seeing kind of a lot of the same theme in changes, I'll say, a lot of the same changes, which were the classes were pretty much more or less staying the same. The talents were getting a lot of work. Seemed like they were getting a lot of attention, a lot of work done to them, kind of changing them, making them a little more relevant, a little more worthwhile in a lot of cases. So there weren't too many talents out of the 3 that were kind of iffy. I don't think so. Yeah, I think that was pretty much it. So there you go, folks. Hope you enjoyed that, and thank you for watching.